Welcome to Drawing Me Out with Bill Willingham. This time to shake it up a little bit, I'm going to do the Bill Willingham part, and Brad Tomte will be playing the Brad Tomte part. Say hello, Brad.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
I'm certain everyone in a shouted chorus just said, "We're doing well, Brad. How's about you?"
You sure
Um,
like to speak for them a lot.
well, someone has to. Someone has to stick up for the little guy, the groundlings, as Shakespeare often referred to them.
Bill the Advocate Willingham.
Yep, that's me. I'm all about giving, giving, giving. So this time, we're getting away from questions. I think we've done questions for a while, and we want to get back a little bit to things that are subject matter that is useful to you, the listener, to make it worth your while to check in. So in the next couple of episodes, we're going to talk about writing books, writing funny books, etc. We'll talk about drawing a little bit. There's two subjects that always lead off any discussion of writing with me. One is naming characters, which I think is much more important than most do. And I have some things to say about that, but I'm not going to talk about it this time because the other first question about writing that always happens, if you're not, the first question is really, how do I get into it? Because the people that generally listen to things like this are hungry to get into the business. But we've discussed that. We've dealt
We
with
kind
it.
of covered that, yeah, on episode 1.
Yeah, and if they paid attention, everyone who wants to be in the business is now in the business. They've got their rich and famous contract. They're cruising. The first question then that I refer to is the perennial, where do you get your ideas? Which is always asked and often dismissed because my attitude used to be, and that of many professional writers, is we don't know. We don't. I mean, we all want to sound like authorities that we know what we're doing, and the answer is I don't know where I get my ideas. Now there are some scoundrels in the business who could answer that question. Where do you get your ideas? From other people. I take them. It's like this guy's doing good. Um, so I will steal my ideas from him. I have stolen some ideas for a time or two in my career, but never purposely, mostly inadvertently, in the sense that one of the things you'll learn first is that lots of people have the same or similar ideas. Ideas are of low currency value in that area unless you are the first or the second or whatever to capitalize on them. Either the first to get there with a good idea, or you didn't get there first, but you got there best. There's a story I like to tell. Elmore Leonard, the uh, wonderful book writer, screenwriter, he wrote many westerns. He wrote stories that inspired and led into the wonderful Justified TV series that I know you like well as I do, Brad.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really
So
solid storytelling and just really engaging characters.
he, very laconic man who always preaches the gospel of brevity in writing, and you should look up Elmore Leonard's rules on writing. They're quite good. They're probably on an equal par with Kurt Vonnegut's 10 Rules on Writing. Both of those you could do worse than just following their suggestions as a personal 10 commandments, except for there's two of them, so 20 commandments. But Elmore Leonard once spun a tale about the movie Stagecoach, a wonderful classic Western. And he said it was a wonderful classic Western or something. I'm paraphrasing him. I don't have the actual quotes. But they could do better. They made a few mistakes. I think I could do it a little better. And he did. Then he wrote Hombre, which was very much structured like the movie Stagecoach, starring Paul Newman. And I was impressed with the cojones of a man to look at a classic like Stagecoach. Anyone can look at a movie that's bad or a story that's bad and say, yeah, I could do better than that. And probably you could. I mean, there's a lot of just horrible bad stories out there. But it takes a little something, some some hubris or just confidence out the wazoo to look at a great movie and say, that's a great movie, I can do better. And the only justification for that is if you do. And in my opinion, he did. He pulled it off, that he made structurally and emotionally and profoundly a better movie in Hombre that is basically a Stagecoach rewrite than in Stagecoach itself. So you can come along to an idea after others have had it and do it a little better. And if you do, that is absolutely justified. Which brings us to one of my very first rules in where do you get your ideas, which is always feel free to play the accept card.
The
Right
accept
now,
card?
the accept, as in
Okay.
accept
Right.
this, which is where do you get your ideas? You look at any movie you've loved, a book, whatever, and you say, "Oh, that's great." Except I would have done this. And every one of us, we are all in on that level trained critics of the media we love. We all evaluate something as we watch. Now, oftentimes the storytelling is so good that we get drawn into it. We don't evaluate it while we're too busy just being taken along on this wonderful ride of the story. But then afterwards, your critical faculties kick back in and said, "Well, I would have done. It's wonderful, but I would have done this." When you do that, when you play that accept card, that is your idea generating word. That's the starting pistol at the race that sets you free for action, saying, "Okay, here is where ideas come from." Ideas will often just come to you out of the blue, but what we as professional writers want to do is we can't wait for the blue to cough up randomly an idea that's going to get our attention. We have to, like anything else, we have to get in there and just start working at it, including the idea generating phrase. And so that's one of my go-tos is let's get out the accept card and go through. These are the kinds of stories I like. This is a book I like recently. What are the things in this story where I've said, except they should have done this? And then can that spin off? Is they should have done this strong enough to be worth a new work, a new story? Now, if your exception is, well, it's a great movie, but they should have used a Mustang instead of a Camaro, then okay, that's probably not really good enough to completely revisit that if that's the only change you're going to make. Well, but I like the Mustang, especially the classic 60. Anyway, you, Brad, have one place where you don't like getting ideas from, and this is very close. The accept card is very close to what you abhor. Do you want to revisit what that is?
And abhor is not a strong enough word. Hollywood has taken the accept card and said, well, that was a great movie, except it should be made now instead. I'm not a fan of reboots or remakes. That's not an accept card. That's a, oh, well, we're empty. Reach into the hat and what do we find? And so I won't watch reboots or remakes.
It really is a good example of my Mustang versus Camaro example, which is it just that you want to make a newer version enough to justify doing this? Is it that, yeah, but now we have these actors, we can plug into those roles? Right. Is that enough? What's worse, though, is if they, in my mind, I'm not as adverse to remakes as Brad is. I would go the route of Elmore Leonard, where the only justification is if you do it well. The remake of True Grit being an example. It removes nothing from the classic John Wayne movie, the Jeff Bridges version, but it is so good that I think it justifies redoing it, even though they didn't make many changes other than just the style, the weirdly laconic attitude that the remake had. I'm willing to forgive some remakes. My mother used to complain, why are they remaking that classic? They should remake the bad movies because
Right.
those they need to get right. The problem is the idea that generates the remake button is this movie made a lot of money. If we remake it, we'll make a lot of money. You don't go to bad movies and say that was a terrible movie and it lost millions. Let's redo it. Let's try and fix it, because the studio people say no. We already lost a lot of money on that. That's my theory on why things get remade. But you're right, a dearth of ideas. Let's just go back to the old well and brush things off and represent them. And sometimes it's a wildly stupid move. They remade Casablanca, the classic Casablanca, as a TV series starring David Soul. This was in the days of Indiana Jones, where everyone's going, oh, we need Nazi-era period pieces that are adventure-type things. And we got The Adventures of the Brass Monkey with that he was going to replace Captain Kirk in the first Star Trek movie guy, leading man. Anyway, some of them were kind of okay, and then they said, let's do Casablanca as a series. And who better to play the Humphrey Bogart part than David Soul, TV's David Soul. Now, I kind of like TV's David Soul. I think he was a pretty good TV actor. Starsky and Hutch, Here Come the Brides. But you cannot step into Humphrey's role. Why would you think you could? It was just covered in folly, that. All right, so remakes, probably not a great idea. If you're going to go with, here's some ideas, just don't retell a story, with a few exceptions. In broad terms, there are some kinds of stories that always work. I will always check out a good revenge story. I think.
See, now you're talking about a wide open genre, not
yes.
a true remake of it. In other words, right. You're telling a new revenge story, basically. Now, is that a good way to cue ideas? I mean, pick solid words that you're a fan of. I like revenge. I like mystery. I like buddy cops. Is that a good way to kind of get the juices flowing?
Well, sure, especially in the execution phase, which we will not discuss in this thing. The execution, the actual writing, the actual telling the story is hard work. Why spend that kind of time and effort on something that you're not just dying to do? So, of course, deal with the kinds of stories you love. And also, if you love a certain kind of story, you will start, the idea engine will start kicking on. What kind of a good revenge story can there be? What if it's a service that you can enlist, just like you hire a lawyer or hire a publicist or hire an accountant? It's like, yep, hire a revenger. Okay, that's a free idea for you. What if revenge services are available in a kiosk? Like it's legal, and you can just go get them. And some are better.
Little pictures on the buttons where you can choose.
Yeah. So, and it's that kind of wondering, okay, I like this kind of story. What can I do with it? The other thing that I like to go back to a lot is how often, and the answer is all the time, from anyone, how often have you watched a movie or read a book or however the story is being presented, and you think you figured it out? You think, oh, this is what's going to happen. Now, one of the complaints of being a professional writer is you can't turn that kind of examination off. It's harder to get drawn into a story because you're too busy examining the storytelling, the mechanisms of getting the story fed to you. So you're always writing ahead, is what Megan, my girlfriend, often accuses me of. It's like, stop writing ahead.
Right.
By saying, oh, can I tell you my theory of what I think is going to happen here? And I do that. And of course, if it turns out that I'm right, I shout, where's my check? Because I wrote that scene because it happened the way I predicted. If it doesn't, and that's more often the case, if you think this is where it's going and then it doesn't, congratulations. The where did you think it was going and it didn't, that's your original idea. That's yours. My favorite version of this, I was listening to a band I like called the Cowboy Junkies. And in their second or third album, there's a song where I kept mishearing the lyrics, as we all do. But it was the most poetic turn of phrase where a guy takes his girlfriend off to the Carrion Hills of West LA. And I thought, what an evocative metaphor, the Carrion Hills of West LA. I mean, and you immediately imagine those LA movie people like feeding on each other and, just picking the bones of the dead, which is what they do when they do the remakes that you love so much, Brad.
Right.
Then it turns out once I got the lyrics and I read it, that's not what it said at all. I was kind of disappointed at first. I was saying it said carried her off to the hills of West. I was like, oh, that's not as evocative. Until the light went on and I said, oh, so the Carrion Hills, that's my idea. That's my original idea. So if you think you know what they are going to do, or even better, what they should have done instead of what they did, that's your idea. And that's where you get your ideas. And those are original and wonderful. And congratulations, they belong to you. Brad, what else have you got to add to the where do you get your ideas?
For kind of a recap on your whole spiel on that, check out our Gilligan's Island episode, because that kind of the whole, your theories on that became your original idea of how everything tied together. Yeah, I'm enamored of writers who can tell a new story that feels comfortable. That's, I think, where your accept comes in. And God bless Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale for having it in their contracts that you never get to remake Back to the Future while we're alive.
Wow, that's a great thing to get in the contract.
Yep.
I should start looking at. Anyway, all right, that's a good thing. I think a wonderful point to end this on. Anyway, visit your idea factories. Do it often. Ideas come more readily to those who practice getting ideas than those who wait. If you wait, just wait for wonderful ideas to come to you, they will from time to time come to you. I'm going to end on one anecdote that will lead into the next discussion. I was in Stony Brook, Long Island, trying to break into comics in 1981. And I'm living on Long Island, hanging out at the local hobby shop. We didn't have a local comic shop to hang out in, so I hung out at the local hobby shop. Right next to the hobby shop was a deli with a magazine rack, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the magazines, when I could afford it, I would regularly get was a slick kind of pop science magazine like Discovery. It was called Science 81. A year before that, it was called Science 80. And a year after that, it was called Science 82. And that was, I guess, one of their gimmicks is they were going to just count the years of, whatever year this is being published, which must have been a headache for the lawyers, the trademark people, to have to trademark a whole new title every time. But it was very much like Discovery. And it was, in fact, eventually it got eaten by Discovery. They combined into one magazine. But they kept Discovery as the title and not the science growing number. But this slick magazine had a bunch of science stories that I love, because science stories are, if you're going to play in the sandboxes I wanted to play in, a place to go get ideas. See the theme? In the front of the magazine, before the big lengthy articles, they would have little blurbs, little like, here's a quick little thing. And I saw one little blurb in an issue of Science 81 that just said that scientists think that someday they'll be able to clone dinosaurs because those still active cells of dinosaurs are still in the bellies of mosquitoes who supped on a nice brontosaurus and then got stuck in amber and frozen for all time. And then we could eventually get in there, get that genetic material and create them. And I go, oh my God, the light went over my head. I said, this is a story. This isn't just a story. This is a series. This is a saga. This is everything.
It'll never
exploding. Stop. Well, I was not the only person to read that little blurb, as we found out. As soon as Jurassic Park was announced and described, the first thing I said is, he read that blurb from Science 81. And I don't know that he ever said that's where he got the idea, but I know that's where he got the idea, because that thing was just an idea explosion. Here's the problem. Oh, see, now I'm spacing his name, Jurassic Park, the Michael Crichton.
Right.
Michael Crichton got that idea and did it, executed it. I got that idea, tucked it away, and sat on it until someone else, inevitably. It was a wide-ranging magazine. Lots of people were reading that and getting it. I'm not the only one who read that, said this would make a great whatever. I'm going to make millions, tucked it away, never capitalized on it, and lost as a result. So that leads us to our next episode, which is ideas are cheap, execution is everything. You have to execute in order for your ideas to be any good at all. Everybody owns all the same ideas. No one gets to just own the idea. It's the execution that you get to copyright and hopefully enter the ranks or stay ensconced within the ranks of the brotherhood of storytellers.
Awesome. All right.
Are
Well,
you
then
done?
we'll pick this up on the next episode, and check out our links below for back to those other two episodes we were talking about, and kind of revisit it before you watch the next one of this series.
Alrighty then. We'll see you back here in a week. Bye bye. That's it.